Good morning, class. Welcome to today's science lesson. Today's science lesson, we are going to deal with the topic plants, animal, and fungal cells. We are going to study about living cells that are found in plants, living cells that are found in animals, and also living cells that are fungal. What we are saying is there are many different types of animal cells. They are of many different types and they play specific roles. We say animal cells are similar, but they are not identical. They are different. They are similar but not very identical. And what we are saying, these types or many types of animal cells, they play specific part, specific function within the plant. We are also saying among the fungal, there are other many various types of fungal cells and they play some functions. So we are saying when we are dealing with animals, there are various types of animal cells, and these types of animal cells, they are similar but not identical. Maybe today we shall start by defining what is a cell. What are cells? We are saying cells are basic units of all living things. They normally say cells are building blocks of all human beings. They build those organisms, those living organisms, and so forth. So I think cells are basic units of living things. There are many different types of cells, and because each type has got a very specific function that only particular type of a cell can carry it out. For instance, we can talk, if we are talking about plants, we have palisade cell. They have got their own functions. We have the xylem cells, which are which their main specific role is to transport water through the stem of a plant. That is their functions. But we also have the leafy cells. They play their role by ensuring that they manufacture food through the process of photosynthesis. There are various types of cells. We are going to learn them. But what are these cells? Before we go to different types of cells, we shall look the cells that are found within the animals. We shall also look the cells that are present within the plants. Then we shall look the fungal cells, how they are, their major characteristics, their shapes, and so forth. What are their major differences? We are going to see that. Because one thing, you cannot see a cell with a naked eye. For you to see a cell, you need to be aided by a microscope. A microscope is an instrument that is made in such a way that it enlarges tiny, minute organisms that cannot be seen by naked eyes to the level that we can now see them. We have an electric microscope and we also have a light microscope. An electric microscope is in a position and is able to see even what a light microscope cannot see within a particular cell. So we are saying because cells are microscopic in nature, we need to know that before the discovery of this microscope, whether it was a light microscope or electronic, there were some things we could not have talked about. For us to talk about cells, it is important that for us to discuss in deep about the cells, it is important that it depends on the instrument we have used to observe that particular cell. Before the discovery of important microscope, then cells will not have been discovered and will not have talked about them. We have a short history on people who came, scientists who came up with instruments of observing these cells and so forth. So we are saying it is not until after the discovery of a microscope was invented separately by a German called Hans Janssen. This scientist, Hans Janssen, we are told in the year around 1590, long time, 1590, together with another one called Hans Lippershey, or together with another scientist called Hans Lippershey, and also that was around the year 1609. We are told these two scientists were they were the front runners in the field of science in the area of cell biology or study of cells, because they came up with the discovering, with inventing an instrument that can be used to observe these tiny organisms. And we are told not only that after the discovery of the microscope, even that microscope was enhanced. We are told in the year 1663, another scientist called Robert Hooke, Robert Hooke, in the year 1963, he was the first who came up with a prototype of a simple light microscope. He came up with a simple light microscope. He came up with a prototype of a simple light microscope with a simple magnification lens that at least we can be able to observe these minute microorganisms and give their structures and report. Which this light microscope was later on developed, and we can see it in the lab being used in the laboratory. And we are told in the following year, another scientist called Anton van Leeuwenberg, is also a German scientist, van Leeuwenberg, Hooke. Now, these other scientists, we are told in the year 1675, he discovered a single-celled organism that was stagnant in water. He discovered a single-celled organism. He discovered a single-celled organism that was present in a stagnant water. So he was observing water that was located in a pond, and he named this single organism Animalcules. He named it Animalcules. Yes, Animalcules. That is the first name he gave it to this single-celled organism that he discovered in water. And then in the year 1683, in the year 1683, we are told again the same Leeuwenberg, Hooke, discovered a bacteria in a saliva. Bacteria in saliva. We shall later on learn something on bacteria, because bacteria are present everywhere. They are present in the air. The bacteria are present on our skin in millions. The same bacteria, we have harmful bacteria, and we have beneficial bacteria. We should learn about them. Bacteria are everywhere. Whether you go inside the oceans, the bacteria are there. So we have beneficial bacteria, and we have few bacteria that are harmful, that can cause diseases, but most of the bacteria are beneficial. They can also help in digestion. So we are saying this particular scientist also discovered bacteria, and it was present in the saliva. Then we had René Duchot made a bold statement in 1824. We are told René is also a German, Dutojet. We are told René Dutojet made a bold statement by proposing that all animals and plants were made up of these cells, that the scientist had been studying for nearly 200 years. So he made a bold statement saying animals and plants are made up of cells that scientists had been studying for almost 200 years. So this particular scientist came up and said, no, we have been studying some of these simple organisms, and we have seen these microorganisms in terms of cells. People have discovered others, calling them animalcules. He says, no, these kind of cells that we are trying to discover, the single-celled organisms, these organisms, it seems when we look entirely the whole plant and entirely the animals, they are made up of these simple organisms. He made that bold move. And we are told as technology proceeded and improved, the microscope lenses became more capable of better magnification. Structures within cells were discovered. So it was not only a matter of discovering the cell as it is. No, the scientists, when they came up with the more lenses that can magnify the tiny things, they went ahead also to discover other tiny organs that were present within these tiny organisms. So there were other organelles that were present. So the cell now could be studied in deep. And we are told by the year in 1931, we are told about a scientist called Robert Brown. Let us just have the history of how the study of cell started. And starting cell, we say the cell biology. How cell was discovered and studied. So we better give these people their due respect. That was in 1931. So we are saying in 1931, a scientist by the name Robert Brown. Yes, a scientist by that name, Robert Brown. Robert Brown reported the existence of a small structure in all plants and animal cells. That was his observation. He observed that there was existence of a small structure in all plants and animals. We know that this is a nucleus of the cell. So apart from observing the cell, he noted that within that cell, there is a nucleus, another tiny organelle called a nucleus within a cell of all the plants and all the animals. He came up with that idea. And he made this discovery. So he discovered a nucleus. And he discovered nucleus and said this nucleus is part that governs and regulates the process that occur within the cell. We had seen that this scientist, Robert Brown, in 1831, we are told Robert Brown reported the presence of a small structure that he observed that this small structure was present within animal and plant cell. He was trying to observe both cells, the animal cell and plant cell. Then he discovered that there was another minute structure, minute organelle that was existing in plant cell and animal cell. And when he made that observation, we recognized this small structure that Robert Brown was talking about was what we refer to as the nucleus. What is the nucleus? The nucleus is the command center of the cell. It gives instructions to the cell to perform different functions that are necessary for the existence and for the life of that particular cell. It can give the structure to that cell either to grow, it can give the structure either to grow, to mature, to die, and so forth. Different structure can be given, and the command structure of that tiny microorganism called the cell is the nucleus that is tiny in the middle, in the midst of this cell. Then we have said that the nucleus is part of the structure that governs that particular cell. Then we are saying in 1839, now in 1839, a scientist called scientist called Theodoro Schwann, a scientist called Theodoro Schwann, and Matthias Skelm, and another one, and another scientist called Matthias Tapoti, yes, Matthias Schul, Shade, yes, another scientist called Matthias Shaden. These two of them, they proposed the theory that we now know that theory as the cell theory. So Matthias and Theodoro in 1939 came up with the cell theory. What does the cell theory say? We can write what the cell theory says. The cell theory states the following. One, the cell theory states the following. One, all living organisms are made up of cells. That was the first. All living organisms are made up of cells. That was their first statement in the cell theory, that all living organisms, whatever they are made up of cells. That one was it. Then a second statement they made was new cells. New cells are reproduced when old cells divide into two. They made up this other statement. New cells are reproduced when new cells are reproduced when old cells divide into two, when old cells divide into two. So they also, after their observation, they discovered, yes, apart from the organisms being made up of these cells, again, they discovered that these cells, at times, they do divide themselves into two. The old cells, they divide themselves into two new cells. That was not all observation. They came up with that statement concerning the cell theory. They said all cells are similar but not identical to each other. All cells all cells are similar. Yes, they are similar. All cells are similar, but not identical. Identical to each other. So they came up with that statement. They said all cells are similar, but not identical to each other. Each cell is different from another, but similarity is there. That's what they came up. Then we can easily ask ourselves, okay, this cell theory, these are the facts that we have that pertains to this cell theory, and how can we define what a cell is? What is a cell? In a nutshell, we can define a cell as the basic building blocks of all living things. So cell can be defined definition. So we have said a cell is a basic, cells are the basic building blocks of living things. Cells are basic building blocks of all living things. So living things are made up of these cells. So if these cells have life, then it would add up the whole living organism is alive. But if these cells will die, then they will cause the whole living organism also to die because the cells have ceased to exist. Now we are saying when we talk of these cells now being building blocks of all living things, for instance, we are saying a human body is not made up of 2 or 3 cells. It is made up of a number of millions and millions of cells. Close to 1 billion cells will make up an entire human body or an animal. So we are saying these cells, they provide structures for the body to take in to take in nutrients from the blood, and some cells are responsible for converting nutrients into energy, and they carry out specific functions. Each cell has got a specific function to perform in an organism, in a human body, or in a plant. Cells also, we are told, they contain body's hereditary materials. We are saying these particular cells, they contain body's hereditary materials and they can make copies of themselves. What we are saying, cells can replicate themselves. They can divide, and when they divide, they increase. And we are saying these particular cells we're talking about, they carry hereditary information concerning the total bodies. There are tiny strands of information called chromosomes that are located within the nucleus of a cell, which give the exact characteristics of that particular organisms. So within the nucleus, we have chromosomes that will be able to, they carry hereditary information concerning that particular living organisms. Now, what we are going to study again, we are going to see parts and functions of an animal cell. When we are through with animal cell, we shall also see the parts and functions of a plant cell. Let us start with parts and functions of an animal cell. Parts and functions of an animal cell. Yes, parts and functions of an animal cell. So we shall observe a cell and entirely we shall try to see what parts is it made up of. A cell is made up of another organ called cytoplasm. And here you will bear with me, I'll mention part of these cells, these structures that are present within the cells. After I am through, we shall draw a well-labeled diagram of an animal cell so that we can see these structures that I will have described here. And also we shall also check all the functions, the structures that are present within a plant cell. Then we shall draw the whole plant cell, how it looks like. Later on, we shall see the different types of animal cells and different types of plant cells. So to start with cytoplasm, what is cytoplasm? This is what cytoplasm is. Cytoplasm is made up of jelly-like fluid called cytosol. Cytoplasm is made up of jelly-like fluid called cytosol. So when we are talking of this cytoplasm, it is within this cytoplasm that we shall have other tiny structures, as we shall, like the ribosomes and also the mitochondria. But we shall come to that, how they are also present and the functions that they carry out. So we are saying cytoplasm is part of the cell and is made up of jelly-like fluid called cytosol. Then we can go to another part called endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum. Now, when we are talking about this endoplasmic reticulum, it can be written ER in bracket. Endoplasmic reticulum, what is this structure? This organelle helps to process molecules created by the cell. So we are told endoplasmic reticulum, this organelle helps this organelle helps to process correct. This organelle helps to process the molecules. The molecules produced, created by the cell. Created by the cell, it transports these molecules to their specific destinations, either inside or outside the cell. So within the cell itself, the function of endoplasmic reticulum is to ensure that whenever the cell produces molecules, these molecules that are produced within the cell, they are transported within the cell itself or outside the cell. And we know what the cell has. It has what you call the cell membrane. Cell membrane, we shall come and study also what the cell membrane does. We can go also to another structure that is within the cell, and this structure is called Golgi apparatus. Now, what are Golgi apparatus? What are they? What are their functions? We are told the Golgi apparatus package the molecules processed by endoplasmic reticulum to be transported out of the cell. We are saying that Golgi apparatus, it is an organelle that is responsible for packaging the molecules that have been produced by endoplasmic reticulum ready to be transported outside the cell. So we are saying Golgi apparatus, what they do, they package the molecules. They package the molecules produced by ER, endoplasmic reticulum, ready to be transported outside the cell. So we are seeing the functions of these structures of this organelle called the Golgi apparatus is to package the molecules that have been produced by endoplasmic reticulum, and what are the functions? To package them ready to be transported outside the particular cell. Then we have other structures called lysosome. Now, lysosomes, these are the recycling center of the cell. These are the recycling center of the cell. These are the recycling center of the cell. They digest the foreign bacteria that invade the cell. These are the recycling center of the cell. They digest, they deal with the intruders, any foreign body that tries to intrude the cell. The lysosome are there to fight the invading foreign bodies. If there are bacteria, they will be fought by the lysosome, they will be killed and so forth. So we are told these are the recycling center of the cell. They digest foreign bacteria that invade the cell. They rid the cell of toxic substances, and they recycle worn out cell components. So we can see this, apart from being the recycling center of the cell, they digest foreign bacteria. They digest foreign bacteria and any foreign bodies that try to invade the cell. And also they replace the worn out tissues of worn out substances. They also get rid of the toxic substances, and they recycle worn out cell components. So that is the renew. That is the work of the lysosome. Then we shall go ahead and see another structure called the mitochondria. What is the mitochondria? We normally say mitochondria is a structure that is able to give energy to that particular cell. If the cell has to move, then we say to perform its functions, it derives its function from the mitochondria, because the mitochondria has a way of giving power to the particular cell. And mitochondria is located within the cytoplasm. It is located within the cytoplasm. So what we can say, these are complex organelle. These are complex organelle that convert energy from food. They convert energy from food from food into what the cell can use. so that it can be in a condition that can be used by the cell. They can make copies of themselves, so the mitochondria can multiply themselves. And we are saying that mitochondria is very important to give power to that particular cell so that the cell can perform its functions. It depends on the functionality of mitochondria. Mitochondria are present in all cells, whether they are plant cells, whether they are animal cells. Mitochondria are necessary and they are very important. Then from mitochondria, we can advance alphabetically to another important organ called the nucleus. The nucleus. What is a nucleus? Nucleus, they serve as a cell's command center. They serve as cell's command center. All instruction within the cell are gotten from this nucleus. It is the one that dictates what is taking place within the cell. So we are saying nucleus, they serve as a cell's command center. They sending directions to the cell. They send directions. They send directions. They give directions to the cell. To the cell, either to grow. So if the cell has to grow, such instructions has to come from the nucleus. So they send a direction, they give direction to the cell to grow, mature, if that particular cell has to mature, to grow, to mature, even to die. Yes, to grow, to mature, to die, or to divide. And you know, for the cell to divide, if it was one cell, then that cell divides into two. When the cell divides into two, even the cytoplasm also divides into two. And you find if you are having one cell, then you get two daughter cells immediately. So for you to have those two daughter cells, the instructions has to come from the nucleus. And then the cell will play the functions depending on the energy that is storage gotten from the mitochondria. Then the cell will subdivide itself. We are saying it also contains DNA. We are saying the nucleus, it also contains the DNA. We shall write this DNA in full. The DNA, they carry genetic instructions for that living organisms. DNA is in full is deoxyribonucleic acid. So DNA in full is written as deoxyribonucleic acid, and what the DNA has, it contains instructions within the nucleus. The DNA is located within the nucleus, and on these DNA strands we have the chromosomes which have hereditary information pertaining to that entire living organisms. So it has those instructions. Then from what we have studied about the nucleus, we can advance to the membrane. We can call it the plasma membrane. We can call it the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. It is present within plant cells, animal cells. We are saying this is the plasma membrane. This is the outer lining of a cell. This is the outer lining of the cell. Of course, it protects the body, it gives the shape to the cell, and it protects the body from external interference. So we are saying it separates the cell from the environment and allows the materials to enter and leave the cell. So we are seeing this plasma membrane, you can say it is semi-permeable. It can allow favorable material to enter the cell, and it can allow materials that now are used up, they want to be excreted out, other materials to leave the cell. So we can say the plasma membrane is semi-permeable membrane where it allows some materials to enter and other materials to leave the cell. So it is an outer lining of the cell. Then we can advance from the plasma membrane. We can go to the ribosomes. And we can advance to ribosomes. And what are ribosomes? This is another structure that is present within the cell. Ribosomes are organelles that process the cell's genetic instructions. These are organelles that process the cell's genetic instructions. So we are saying ribosomes are organelles that process the cell's genetic instructions and instructions to create proteins. They are organelles that process. They are the organelles that process. The word process. Yes, to process the cell's genetic instructions to create proteins. Yes, to create proteins, and these organelles they do float freely within the cytoplasms. They are there to create proteins. They give instructions, genetic instructions, and they give instructions. They are organelles that they process the cells and give genetic instructions to create proteins. We are told they float freely within the cytoplasm. Ribosomes are very important because they are responsible for the manufacture of proteins, which is very important for the production of new cells and so forth. Now, from the ribosomes, we can say we have seen tentatively what organs are present within an animal cell. Maybe we can have a structure of an animal cell, and we shall compare that an animal cell with a plant cell later on. A simple structure of a plant, an animal cell looks this way, for instance, and this one can be the cell membrane. That is the cell membrane. Then the middle part of it, that is the nucleus. Then within this one, we can have the cytoplasm. So this is how you can observe an animal cell, a simple animal cell in a light microscope. But we shall later on see within the cytoplasm we have other, if you have an electron microscope, you will find that within the cytoplasm we can have the mitochondria, ribosomes, and so forth and so forth. There are many things, but simple structure, we have that. It's a simple structure of an animal cell. We shall also have a simple structure of a plant cell, and then we make a comparison. So the nucleus is located towards the middle, and the shape of now, we shall also see the differences that are there between an animal cell and a plant cell. Let us see the parts and functions of not an animal cell, but a plant cell. And with the plants, we can have the following relevant information. One, plant cells are the basic unit of life organisms of a plant, a kingdom Plantae. I repeat, plant cells are the basic unit of life organisms of the kingdom Plantae. We have a Plantae kingdom. This is just a plant kingdom. So we are saying plant cells are the basic unit of living organism of the kingdom Plantae. What are we saying? They have nucleus along specialized structures called organelles. We are saying they have nucleus along the specialized structures called organelles. They carry out different functions. So we're saying the plant cell, they have organelles within them. These organelles within them, we have the nucleus within them, apart from the nucleus, which gives special instructions and it plays different functions within that plant cell. Plant cells are differentiated from cells of other organisms. I repeat, plant cells are differentiated from cells of other organisms, but their cell wall, by their cell walls, chloroplast, and central vacuole. We are saying plant cells, for us to differentiate plant cell with cells of other organisms, we are saying plant cells, they have cell wall. Animal cells don't have cell wall, but with the plant cell, they have cell wall. They also have what we call chloroplast. So chloroplast are present within. Chloroplasts are present within the plant cell. Chloroplasts are not present within the animal cell. Cell wall is present within the plant cell. Cell wall is not there within the animal cell. We also have the cell vacuole. There's some open spacing. When we draw, we shall see how the cell vacuole looks like. So we are saying the plant cells have cell vacuole. Other living organisms don't have the cell vacuole. That is where the major difference comes in. We are saying plant cells are the basic building block for the plant's life, and they carry out all the functions necessary for the survival of that particular plant, for their survival. Photosynthesis is the making of food from light energy. What happens with the plant cell? It has the ability. Plant cells that have chlorophyll, that is green color, they are able to make their own food through the process called photosynthesis. They are able to do that because they have the presence of chloroplast, and the chloroplasts have chlorophyll. So they are able to carry out a process called photosynthesis, and they manufacture their own food. So we are going to learn important structures that are present within the plant cell. One of them is, we can start with chloroplast. We can start with the chloroplast. It is an organelle that is present within the plant cell. It has functions. So we are saying they are found only in plant and algae cells. Chloroplast, they are found only in plant cell, only in plant cell, plant and algae cell. Plant cell and algae cells, that's one. They carry out a process of photosynthesis. They carry out a process of photosynthesis. They carry out a process of photosynthesis. So what we are saying, chloroplasts are very important. They are present in plant cells. We have said, apart from being present in plant cells, also algae, they have this chlorophyll, because algae, they are also able to manufacture their own food. So we are saying this plant cell, they control chloroplast, and chloroplasts have chlorophyll. Because they have chlorophyll, then they can easily carry out the process called photosynthesis. We can go to another organ called vacuole. Now, vacuoles, what are vacuoles? Only plant cells have vacuoles. Only plant cells have vacuoles, and we are saying vacuole is a small sphere of a membrane. A small sphere of a membrane, of membranes. So vacuoles are a small sphere of membranes within the cell that contains fluid. Within the cell that contains fluid. And this fluid exists in form of iron and other molecules. Vacuoles are basically large vessels. As we shall see in the diagram, basically large vessels. Yes, they are basically large vessels. They help to maintain the pressure of the contents within the cell. And then last information, we can study also a structure called the cell wall. We had said earlier that cell wall is only present among the plant cell. If we compare it with the plant cell, no. Plant cells don't have a cell wall. They have a cell membrane. What about this cell wall? It is a tougher layer found outside the plant cell. It is a tough layer. It's a tough layer found outside the plant cell. Yes, it's a tougher layer found outside the plant cell that gives strength and maintains tuccidity. It gives strength and maintains tuccidity. In plants, cell wall contain mainly cellulose. So the cell wall are made from what we call cellulose. Cellulose. We shall see other organs later on that have a cell wall, but it is made up of different things together. Now we shall have a diagram, and then let us have a diagram showing plant and animal cells. Let us have these diagrams together so that we see these organs and their differences. Plants and animal cells. We can have a simple diagram that will show a typical plant cell and a typical animal cell. we can have this one, and it will represent with that one we'll try to represent what a plant cell is, and yes, what we are having, that one. The first line, that is a cell wall. Then we can have the cell membrane from the second line, cell membrane. That is the cell membrane, this is the second line. Then we have the cell vacuole. Then we have cytoplasm. That is cytoplasm. Then you have the chloroplast. Those are the chloroplasts. Then we have, this is the nuclear. Then here in between we can have our that is the nuclear, that is the cell membrane. That is the cytoplasm. So we have the cell membrane, the cytoplasm. Then we have cytoplasm, yes, indicated nucleus and the cell membrane. So you can see this is a typical plant, typical animal cell. And this other one here, typical plant cell. So a typical animal cell and a plant cell. So if you observe, you can see the things that are present within a plant cell and are absent within that animal cell. For instance, we have cell wall here. There's no cell wall, but we have similarity, cell membrane being everywhere. Then we have the vacuole, this big space, but the vacuole is not there. Then we have the cytoplasm that is present within the cell wall, the plant cell. It is also present within the animal cell. The nuclear, the darker part here, that's the nuclear. We also have the nuclear. We are going to end this lesson today, but when we come, we shall continue with animal and plant cell, and we shall try to see the similarities and differences that are existing. We have only enumerated a few. Remember, there are other similarities and differences that cannot just be observed on a light microscope. If we use an electron microscope, we can see more differences and more similarities. For instance, when we talk of just cytoplasm, within the cytoplasm, we have the Golgi apparatus, the ribosomes, and so forth. So we can say they are present within the two cells. And that is the end of the lesson. Thank you.